My name is Lori Power. My company is MP Benefits, and I'm a group benefit consultant. And one of the things that I love to do is I love meeting new people, having great and dynamic conversations. And I really appreciate Shawna being on the hot seat today, coming in and agreeing to have one of those great conversations. For those who may not be from Alberta or in the Edmonton region, Shawna Randolph is a well-known figure in our homes and probably best known from CFRN Edmonton, now CTV, as the prime news anchor and co-host of Alberta Primetime. Shawna is the proud recipient of Edmonton's Women of the Year Award, the Consumer's Choice Award for Business Excellence. Today, we're going to dive into public relations, your relationship with the public. That would be imaging, messaging, how people view you, and how to get your story out effectively so you don't do one of the things I do. Well, I like the way Laurel put it, and don't let my Scots take over. Take me through, Shawna, a little bit about your history and how you came to be independent yourself in the consulting field.
Oh boy, okay. This is hard. I go back 30 years. First of all, I want to say thank you, Lori, for this opportunity, and hello, everybody. I want to do that from the very beginning. It's just, I'm very excited about being part of this group today. So yes, just in a nutshell, 30 years ago, I thought, I just want to be a professional communicator. I want to tell stories. And I was just so silly in my mind. I say back now silly because I went into day-to-day news gathering, which is so incredibly stressful. And it was stressful then, and it's even more so for journalists today with limited resources and the instant world and that sort of thing. But I just wanted to be a storyteller. That was just my thing. Even when I was a child, I would drive my parents crazy, my whole family, and I would take like the Edmonton Sun, and I would take newspaper articles and get this old style type of typewriter, and I would type my own versions of a newspaper article and then make them hear me read it to them. So that was that. And then I went through just so much stress, although enjoyable, but stress through the height of my career. And I just thought, after 10 years at that point of being in the day-to-day news grind at CFRN, that it was just too much for me. And then I went into public relations with the city of Edmonton, with the transportation department, to be their media spokesperson, and then just transitioned on into still full-time, being a consultant and just working with so many people. And then it was in 2008 where I went, okay, now I'm on my own because I just want part-time work and family. So to answer your question as to why did I do it? It was for balance, Lori. That's the bottom line. And just after so many years of being a spokesperson or a coach or a journalist, I wanted to share my expertise, and I get so much satisfaction and just feel rewarding when I coach someone and I see them doing it right. And so that's that. I love working for myself, and I love the opportunity to coach and help people protect their reputation.
When you start working with somebody, we spoke about this a little bit. What's the first thing they say when they start working with you?
Oh, well, first of all, they say you're a lot shorter than I thought, but it's so funny. But you know what they do? They go, oh, so I guess the media isn't so scary. And a lot of people that's one thing. Oh, sorry, this is my boy, Boba. I just have to announce him because he's not really distracting, but he's there. So I have to acknowledge this. But no, they're many times people are just scared of dealing with anybody with the media. Once they realize and learn from me that members of the media are regular people. Yes, they do certain things that they have to for their job, and they can be really type A, impatient personalities. They learn, and that, people in the media are just regular folks like all of us. Yeah.
It's all a matter of getting that messaging out. I loved how you said, you wanted to be a storyteller. I can relate to that. People who know me know that I can very much relate to that. And both parties are wanting to get the story out effectively. What piece of advice, if anything, when you started your career, were you given that you still apply now?
I have to say, I was taught, and my main mentor, Daphne Kewen. I don't know if some of you remember her or know of her. She was the first female primetime news anchor in Western Canada, kind of paved the way for women in the industry. And I learned from her to be driven, to be focused, And what I learned on my own, because I was so young when I started in the industry, is always ask for help. Like, don't be scared to reach out. You'd be surprised how many times people will give you a hand that few people will actually say no. So there was that. And then I learned that it's okay to be human, that we are going to make mistakes in life. As long as you fess up and take responsibility when need be, then you will gain the respect of people over time. So that's what I learned. And that's really solid advice that I always give to my clients.
That authenticity. When you start to work with somebody, whether it's a person or the full organization, what's your first step?
I think it's evaluating them. What is their current reputation? Are they someone that, or an organization that is very well respected in the community overall? Are they an organization that may have a relatively good reputation, but just have been coming out of some issue where they wish they would have handled it a little better, and now they have a little blip to deal with? And it's very rare actually that I have people approaching me that say, you know, we suck in our reputation in the community and help us. It's more so people being proactive or saying, gosh, I should have had training before we had this issue. Now we have this issue and we have to kind of hem things up. But that's it. That's the first thing I do, is to kind of evaluate, where are you with your status in your overall reputation?
How do you find people, because there's so much slanting, you know, my small amount of time in the media, I one of the things that threw me off as a journalist was when an editor could put a slant on a story. And I can imagine from now that you're on the other side of the fence and you're working with the client who's then working with the media, it's one thing when the journalist is asking the question, they're gathering the information, but by the time it goes into print, onto air, it can have a slant, an unwanted slant. How do you work through those?
You know, this is what I often say to people, Lori, is we only have control over what we say to the media in any interaction we have with them. We don't have control over what they do with it, which, oh, I wish we had, right? But we don't. So how I deal with it is, if it turns out that you're not happy in the end with what has happened as your end result, make sure, actually, you shouldn't even be doing this in a proactive sense, but connect with your audience on your own as well. Do vlogs, do something that you're sending out to your own audience, not depending on the media. So there's two things I guess I'm saying here is, in the first place, I say to people, don't depend on media coverage to get your story out, right? You're competing with so many different people, so many different organizations for that little bit of press or airtime. So try things, and I consult and teach them how to reach through social media or just any other way in a proactive sense. But yes, when it comes to an issue and you're not liking how it's being portrayed in the media, be real and get out there, and without putting down the media outlet, but just to say, hey, there's some misconceptions out there. We just want to make sure everybody knows this is the real situation. So that's the only thing you really can do.
I couldn't agree with you more. It seems like such a daunting task though, because it's like trying to get in and be a molecule in the fire hose. You know, like there's certain avenues that will definitely get your messaging out there, and then all others are like, well, is somebody really following my tweet? Do I do it on Facebook? Do I do it on LinkedIn? Do I go to WhatsApp? Like, how do you disseminate what's going to work? And is it, I'm not putting words in there, not meaning to, but just the confusion of where to go to put your information out most effectively. Where do you find it?
And I think it's a case-by-case basis. First of all, just back to me saying, if you're not happy with media coverage, and this is what you can do on your own to kind of correct things, pick your battles, right? It could be something really little. It's like, oh, I wish they didn't do that, but it's not damaging. It's okay, whatever. Because you don't want to be known as being whiny. But then deciding how, I think it's just to really be working with a good communication specialist to help you with that. I think that's really open-ended to say in a general sense. I think it just depends on, here's what you may not be pleased with, and these are the audiences I want to target. You know, of course, we all know social media, different, Twitter and Instagram and Facebook really targets different audiences, right? So what is the most important thing that I want to say to what particular group, and go from there.
I loved your pillars: the open, transparent, accountable, honest, accessible, and consistent. I would think that if you are achieving those in any and all messaging, that you will probably never come across a stumbling block that you created yourself.
Yeah. So I call that, it's really mainly 4 of them that I focus on. TAHA, Shawna's TAHA rule of communications: to be transparent, accountable, honest, accessible. And yes, absolutely, in that sense, be consistent all the time. But basically to say, most importantly, be accessible at all times. So to your audiences, either via social media or website, or your frontline communication staff, phone, people who answer the phones, or through the media whenever they call you, right? To always face it, as much as you may not want to speak, and I'm talking specifically to media, you may not want to. Every time they reach out and you're not expecting them to, I teach people it's an opportunity. So once you go through finding out what they want, and never doing a cold call interview, right, Lori? You and I know how dangerous that can be. But once you find out what they want and do that fact-finding mission and then prepare for the interview, what is the opportunity that you have given yourself to what particular audience that you want to try to reach during the media interview? So, but the biggest thing is be accountable, be accessible, from the very beginning. Like, make sure people can reach you and respond. And then, yes, if you've done something, and we all make mistakes, that you just have to fess up and admit it, do it, because it's all accumulated over time, that people can trust you. So be, first of all, transparent, don't hide things. Scandals, cover-ups are really bad for someone's reputation. And then be accountable and honest. So one thing I always say to my clients in the sessions that I teach are, if you make a mistake, just say, you know what, I feel horrible for how I made so-and-so feel. Like I compare it to in general, if I was to say something to, I'm going to pick a name, Laurel. If I say to Laurel, I am so sorry for what I did, that it made you feel this way. I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure it doesn't happen again. Something like that, instead of, I'm sorry if I offended you, or I'm sorry, but you blah, 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 blah. Like, of course, no one respects that. But I always say, like, it's okay. We make mistakes. I'm so sorry for how I made you feel. Please forgive me. I won't do that again, or I'll try my best. Okay? Again, we're human. So that's really my mantra, I guess, to say, is like, just number 1, be accessible. Number 2, when something happens, face the music.
I like the way that you look at things as an opportunity. Lisa and I had a conversation of, will we do a show on what it is to be a human? Can we not just treat people like, that we are human beings and we're not automatons or robots? When we need to start moving a message. So when you're first, somebody is saying, okay, well, now I'm ready to start moving a messaging, or they're trying to pick up the pieces of that messaging and move it elsewhere. Where's the starting ground there?
So do you mean just through media, or just in general? So I'm an organization and I want to get out something. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So when they're starting to work with you, like, let's say they're not a public figure. Let's say that the part of their schematic is, I've just taken over as CEO of this company. I want to move a particular message to part of my marketing plan, and we're working with Shawna. So where do we start to move that messaging forward, not even knowing which avenue to go down? Is it going to be media? Is it going to be social media? Is it going to be a vlog? Where are we going to go?
Okay, so the first thing I do, and this is really comprehensive, is what are your main objectives? What do you want to accomplish, right? Do you want to increase, if it's a nonprofit, donors, sponsorship? Are you a municipality that wants to educate the public about the new person at the helm and what they want to make with changes, that sort of thing? So the number 1 thing, and it's just general communications, is what's your communications plan? What do you want to achieve? What are your goals, objectives? And then going from there, depending on what it is, you break it down to, okay, what are my main audiences that I want to target? with these audiences, what do I want to say to each different group? And then you break it down into how do you reach them and what are the tools that you want to do? Do you want to do some stakeholder consultation groups, as well as going through media, social media? It's very convoluted, but the more prepared people are, the better outcome they're going to have. And then I always say to them, have a way to evaluate all this work that you're doing, that you can go back and see whether it was effective.
For those of us that aren't mega company owners, and we do want to build a presence because it helps with our clients to connect with us on an emotional level. What's one piece of advice that you can give those of us that are just working in our own small marketplace? I can say, for one, I never want any media to do a story about me ever. Like, if they never know I exist, I'm okay with that. But I do want clients to know me, and I do want to know from a public relations standpoint, what really is effective for a business owner.
I've said this a couple times. If I'm repeating, I apologize in this one.
No, and if you think I'm not listening, okay, I'm listening. I'm just trying to get all angles.
No, you are fully listening. What I'm getting at is, one of my answers, this answer is going to be similar to what I've said before. It's audience. That's the thing. What I'm getting at, Lori, because I've been talking a lot about audiences, is just really, it depends on who your audience and is. If you want to connect with current clients, make them feel in any way that you care, that you listen to them, that if they have any concerns, that you're there for them. I think that's the biggest thing. And then just depending on who it is, as you get to know them a little bit, to relay that to them so that it makes sense to them, if that kind of makes sense. So I guess the biggest thing is, so for current ones, is know who your clients are. Naturally, you do know, but really get to know a little bit. But I appreciate that it's time consuming. It could even be just a quick little email or whatever. But just whenever you have an opportunity overall, make them feel like you care about them. And then if you want to reach out to others, well, that's a whole other ball because you don't know quite personally who your audience is. But again, it goes back to targeting. If I want to expand my client base and I want this particular demographic, how do I approach each one? I hope that answered.
It did.
Okay,
it did. I was thinking when I phrased the question, I always pick on Natasha when she's in the room, but something that I've noticed, they're in British Columbia. One thing that I've noticed, Natasha, that you do really well, which tells me that you know your audience, is they've aligned with certain charities and they've done certain drives. And that really has drawn my attention when I'm looking at how your company is progressing. It seems like you're giving back to the audience to which you serve. If I have that wrong, correct me if I'm not correct on that one. But that, I think, is a good example of a good PR schematic of understanding your audience and doing that give back. It creates that positive vibe.
Yeah, you'd be surprised just how few people actually think about audience. That's the number one key to making sure you're connecting with people. Is people say, I'm going to do a speech, and this is what I'm going to say. And the speech sometimes has absolutely no relevance to the specific audience that you're trying to reach. They're just thinking, I just want to say this. It's more than what you want to say. Make sure you connect.
Nice. Now I'm going to delve into it because the curiosity is always going to get the better of me. Tell me, from the time when you first started and you wanted to be a storyteller, tell me how media, you were in television for I would say the bulk of your career of being in media. How has it changed, in your opinion, from when you first started to where you see it now?
How much time do I have? Oh my goodness. So I'm going to say this as simply as possible, but yet there's a little bit of storytelling in this storyteller. So when I first started, and I say back in the day, because it was really back in the day, I graduated 1991. Like, my biggest stint of the day-to-day news gathering was like 1991 to 2001. And then I took a break from media and then went back into it, but not for the day-to-day news gathering. It was to host a Alberta province-wide news magazine show that was recorded during the day. So it was completely different from what I'm getting at now. So the everyday news gathering back then was stressful as it was, because you had so the television examples, you had a team of 3 people. You had yourself as the reporter, your videographer partner, and the electronic editor who's in charge of the video, using the machines to put it on the air. I call them the magicians. And so in the morning, we would be assigned a story. And it was stressful enough at that point, once you got the story assigned to you, to convince people to speak, because sometimes, of course, people don't want to talk to the media, understandably, unless they're really upset, and then boy, do they ever talk. But you do that, and then you go out and you do the interviews. You're with your videographer, you're playing off everything together as a team, getting the video to go with it, coming back. And at that time, it had maybe a 4 o'clock or so deadline to do all of that, choose what I want to use to put my story together, the clips from my interviewees, and what I wanted to say leading up to it, the footage to use, have the producer approve it, and then get it off to the electronic editor as part of our team. So that was stressful enough, because you're worried about making that deadline. These days, oh my gosh, with the instant world. So these days, a reporter gets a story assigned to them. And in many cases, in the television world, there's only one person now. They do the job of all 3 that I never had to worry about. I never had to worry about videoing while I was out there and coming back and actually editing it and pulling visuals all on my own. I can't imagine that. On top of that, social media tool of expectation for journalists these days is Twitter, right? Mainly Twitter, that they get their story assigned and they are tweeting updates during the day. And in the television world, we had to, at that point, just worry about putting that television story together. But now they have to, with whatever they have, a tablet or iPhone, whatever, put together a perfectly grammatically correct print version that they have to file to their web editor. On top of that, like, it's insane. And then live cut-ins into newscasts constantly. Wow. And then on the flip side, the print and radio journalists, same thing, have to tweet all day. They're working on now 4 or 5 different stories a day, many times. They're just with cutbacks. With many industries, I appreciate it, doing a lot more with less, but it has changed so much, Lori. On top of that, there just seems to be less and less respect for real journalists. People are angry these days, maybe a little better that the weather's getting better across the country, and COVID hopefully is settling down, but there's been this in this last little bit, people are just angry. So it has changed immensely. I say to colleagues, former colleagues of mine, how are you still in there? I just don't get it. I'm glad I'm doing my own thing and helping people with their interactions with individuals who are still in the media.
I can't imagine it. I mean, really, when I worked in newspaper, it was, you filed your story. You had your bulk. We were bi-weekly, or it's not bi-weekly, twice a week newspaper. So you had your beats that you had to work on. But now you're absolutely right. They have to be up on YouTube. They have to be on Twitter. They have to, like, all of these different feeds, no matter what media that they're in. It's crazy.
Shawna, fantastic stuff. Any comments you'd have around sort of the public professional reputation versus the slightly more informal non-professional, let's say, and risks about having, do you see what I'm getting at? Like,
not yet,
not being specific to social media or what have you, but individuals might have more of a structured professional reputation, but that, in my opinion, there isn't really a distinction, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about the professional versus the non-professional.
Okay, so Mike, thank you for that question. I do want to make sure I fully do understand it, so I'm going to clarify before I get it. So just making sure. So you mean a reputation someone has as being part of a team of an organization versus their own personal reputation? Is that? Yeah,
good point in clarifying, because I'm not exactly sure I know what I'm asking, but so I'll use a very specific example. Let's say if LinkedIn is, sort of typically where you exhibit your professional self, and Facebook or Instagram, et cetera. And if there is let's call it a disconnect between those two, just any comments you'd have there.
Oh, wow. Okay, now I fully understand, and great question. This is very common with people. They don't realize that something they may say on social media is something that can come back and bite them in their professional world when they may be challenged on that when they're connected with their team. So yes, I can't stress enough, especially with LinkedIn, right? I mean, LinkedIn has, in many cases, your whole history of who you're with. And then you may be putting something out there or responding to something that is completely against the organization's core values, code of conduct, that sort of thing. So it's very, very important to watch for that. And then even just in regular social media use, the media in particular loves to, and they find ways, they're just so good at it, connecting and finding out Mike McLennan this is the one who's with that organization, and he's saying something without even being linked to an organization. You're not even realizing it on your own Instagram account or whatever, and they will extract, use in a story, and then have you respond to it. So yeah, it's so important to be consistent. And really what I say is really weigh whether you want to be part of social media in general. Like, what's really your purpose for it? If it is to get exposure and really promote, and you should be proud if you have a good reputation among the public. If that's the case, yes. But if it's to just vent, really, it's too risky. I say to people, save it, phone a neighbor or go talk to a neighbor in person, vent that way.
And don't be on a recording where
yes.
somebody's going to come back and say that. I see the lawyer just joined the room. We already did the disclosure, James. Nobody's allowed to sue us. So from anything that we say. What's a common misconception that people have? And we've talked about the audience. We've talked about a lot of things. What am I missing here in what is a real common misconception when it comes to people's public relation image and how to protect that reputation?
Okay, so a couple things. Just making sure that you always fess up, right? Because people will eventually forget about it, honestly. So here's the big misconception is that people think that people will always remember blips. So if you do a little bit of that, they'll always remember. They won't, honestly. They'll remember the big gaffes if you are covering something up, whatnot. But the biggest misconception is that really people, they're so focused in their own world, and then the next little thing comes along. So there's that. The other misconception is that people focus more on what you're saying than anything. And that, I want to clarify, is just not true at all. And I want to quote, I have this handy because I was hoping you'd ask me this, is human rights activist Maya Angelou. People may remember, very, very well known in the States. And I'm just getting this here, Maya Angelou. What she's known for saying, I've learned that people will forget what you've said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. The biggest thing, and this is what I always say to my clients, is yes, it's very important. What are your main messages that you want to convey and that sort of thing? But in the end, it's most important the impression you're leaving them. So how does someone feel? Are they snickering at you? Are they giggling? Are they upset? Or are they just relaxed and feel like, okay, I trust this person. I believe in this person. So big misconception is it's not so much what you're saying, although that's important, but it's more overall the impression.
Just wanted to know if you had any, maybe some best practices for maybe sharing sensitive subjects on social media. So Lori knows, we do a lot of social media posting. Chelsea and I really do a lot of image branding in our industry that, and Tracy will know this, that, this is what Tracy and I look like as insurance brokers, but that's not the general perception of the public, this is what you look like to be a very successful person in the insurance industry. And so we're trying to change that image, but we also like to talk about a lot of things that are important going on in our world, in our community, in our country. So certain things around, mental health, even, Orange Shirt Day, even Canada Day, right? So, a lot of these subjects can be quite sensitive, right? And you want to navigate them, you want to tread the waters lightly, but you want to pay homage to the people that deserve it. Do you have any best practices about how to navigate that and not tarnish your reputation or send off any red flags where you need to hire a PR person afterwards because put your foot in your mouth?
Yeah, I'm glad you're asking that, Natasha. A big thing is, number one, always trust your gut. So if you think, oh, this may not, it likely may not go over well with someone. So that's a big thing, is whenever you're putting anything out there or just strategizing, it's trust your gut. Ask people around you outside of your own circle, friends, families, colleagues, others, about if we were to do this, would that
how does that land with you?
How did that land with you? But I think a big point of advice, I think, is before you really decide what you're going to do, check out what other people are doing on social media. There's no rush. I always say, don't rush, because people are like, I want to do this. And then it's, oh no, I mean, there's no rush. What I'm saying, to do something regularly on social media, make a plan, say a calendar with this and this, and then decide, okay, for Indigenous, International Indigenous Day in June, I think, do I want to? And if so, how would I go about it? Plan it out. But as I said, before you even do it, check what other people are doing, check the reaction, and again, follow your gut and do your research.
Great advice. Thanks so much. I know we're at the top of the hour and I got another meeting to run to. This was fun. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Thank you. This is always the fastest half hour. I say it every week. This is always the fastest time of the week. Shawna, I can't thank you enough for coming in, and I hope we can persuade you to come back again, because I have a lot more questions that I'd like to delve a little bit deeper. So if there's an opportunity in the fall to come back and shake that tree a little bit more, I would appreciate doing that. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes. And I would be interested, especially because by that time, again, hopeful, I am an internal optimist that we will be at normalcy again, is to talk about how has things changed maybe in media and public relations in general with us, that new shift back to normal in the fall. Again, hoping. So I would, sure, Glory. Thank you.